So Derek Lewis has earned a title shot against UFC heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier on November 3rd in Madison Square Garden. But the only problem is Lewis is suspended until November 6th. It looks like he broke 2 orbital bones in his fight against Alexander Volkov. And it looked like he also broke his hand. And he can't even have any contact till October 28th. And he's literally suspended until November 6th. The pay-per-view is on November 3rd. What the fuck is the UFC going to do? Now, doctors usually clear these fighters beforehand, and that's probably going to happen here. But Derek Lewis was even talking about, like, he didn't deserve a title shot in the post-fight show. He was saying his cardio is not good enough. Bisping and Woodley, pretty much agreed with him. So what's the UFC going to do here? And do you think, like, the only reason they booked this fight is because they had to? It looks like Stipe's waiting in the wings, so why'd they go with Derek Lewis here?
I feel like they were definitely trying to capitalize off of, like, the pop that Derek Lewis got on the most recent card here. When he knocked out Volkov in I think the third round with 11 seconds left. And, yeah, they just tried to rush it through so they could get a matchup with him against DC, get the biggest pop possible. They probably thought that was going to do bigger numbers than a Stipe rematch, but...
At UFC 229, Derek Lewis did double his followers. Like, he within a couple hours, like, he was going up by, like, 1,000, like, every, like, half an hour. Like, it was crazy. Like, he just made the most of that. I feel bad. I still feel bad for Sean O'Malley, who failed a USADA test. I guess I can't really feel too bad for him because he failed the USADA test, but, like, that's quite a spot. That's quite a card to be in. Like, a big win there definitely just, like, makes your numbers go through the roof. Like, and Derek Lewis, like, he went from being a really unpopular fighter. Like, he was always popular to the hardcores, but, like, after his performance against Francis, like, people were kind of, like, writing him off, saying he didn't really deserve anything. Like, he was kind of washed up. His back was giving him too many problems. And, yeah, look at him now. All it took was one knockout. He didn't even really do anything in that whole entire fight, and he landed one flurry, and now he's fighting Cormier. Now, granted, Cormier is probably going to, put him through the wheelhouse for 5 rounds, and he's definitely going to test his cardio, but, I don't even know if Derek Lewis is going to be cleared, though. Like, he looked really hurt. Like, he was wincing after every blow to his eye. Like, I can imagine he'd probably stop feeling the pain from that in 2 or 3 weeks, but, like, will he be healed? Will he be healed enough to fight again?
Yeah, I feel like they're definitely rushing it a little too quickly, especially after that fight, because he definitely took significant damage throughout that fight, and it's a very short period of time in between. And then, not only that, yeah, like you had mentioned, and like he had mentioned after the fight, I don't think that he has the cardio and the gas tank, and he's not going to build that up over a month or less.
Well, the good news is he is in fight shape. Now, what that means for him is only really, like, probably a round and a half, and Cormier is definitely going to test him. Like, Cormier won't get outworked. Like, there's no way.
And then he'll grind it out, you know what I mean? He'll wrestle him a ton. I feel like Derek Lewis would struggle a lot against somebody like DC.
Yeah, definitely. But if he can knock him out and he finds a way to win here, he gets a fight against either John Jones or Brock Lesnar at heavyweight. Stipe, is always in the mix, or like a Cain Velasquez or somebody like that, but, like, that's a huge spot to be in.
Yeah.
Now, if he loses, I wonder if his back's healed enough even to, like, continue fighting. Like, obviously he's doing it for the money now. That's a big factor. He even said, like, he wasn't too interested in the title fight, but if the money was right, he'd jump into it. And again, like, it was never a question of him being tough enough, because he'll fight no matter what. Like, even if he, like, was missing an arm, like, he'd go in there. But
yeah, I can definitely imagine too. It's an opportunity that you certainly wouldn't want to pass up, because the money, the championship prospect, you know what I mean? And then, like you said, if he wins this fight, not only does he get the pop and the belt and everything from that, he gets to also have the prospect of facing John Jones or Brock Lesnar, which would be a crazy true money fight. So, hey, why not take your opportunity? Especially if you don't take it now, there's no guarantee that after this next, you know what I mean, that it'll be available again.
So. Now, Curtis Blades called out Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis said something like fuck Curtis Blades. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, because like Curtis Blades is another one of those matchups, and Curtis Blades just recently beat Alistair Overeem. He took him down and then knocked him out with elbows on the ground. Like fucking, I think the same thing would happen to Lewis with him, but like Curtis Blades isn't a big enough name to risk your star power against right now for anybody. Nobody wants to fight Curtis Blades, and I don't really blame him. Honestly, I think Stipe is going to find himself against Curtis Blades because Stipe campaigned for a rematch. He has the most heavyweight defenses in history in a row with 3. He, he knocked a lot of guys out in his run. He never really... The only misstep he really had was against Junior Dos Santos in a fight that he won in a lot of people's eyes in that Fox main event back in the day. That at the distance, he didn't get knocked out or anything. I mean, he did he get knocked out by Stefan Struve or something back in the maybe he got stopped by Stefan Struve back in the day. That's possible. I gotta look that up, but yeah, I think Stipe is gonna get stiffed here. I mean, he didn't really have nice things to say about the way the UFC treated him. And if you're the UFC, Stipe didn't really do great business for you when he was on top. I mean, he had the show, I think, when he knocked out Alistair Overeem, I believe UFC 203, that did decent business, but that was the CM Punk card, and he got credit for a lot of that rub. So moving on, Conor and Khabib were both sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. They were both given a 10-day suspension. The investigation's still ongoing, but Nevada also wants to hold on to Khabib's entire $2 million purse, according to Dana White. Now, I don't think there's any way something like that sticks, but yeah, I mean, what do you think should happen to them? Like, they should something should happen to them. They shouldn't be allowed to do this, and if there's no consequences, they'll probably do it again. But what do you think should happen?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that I know exactly what the best consequence for the action should be, but they definitely have to have some sort of punishment because, I mean, in the case it could be like clearly you can't have somebody jump out of the octagon and attack somebody. It doesn't matter what was said before, and obviously there's things that get said that are...
I will say it did come out today that Dylan Danis apparently called him something like a Dagestani Muslim rat. And Khabib apparently heard it in round 2. And, like, he acknowledged it, apparently, like, in between rounds. Like, he turned around and looked right at Danis in between rounds and locked eyes with him. Just a little precursor to what would go on later when he jumped out of the cage.
Right.
But, continue, sorry.
No, you're fine. I definitely hear you on that. And, I mean, it definitely went too far as like, the pre-fight stuff, as far, like, the insults against religion, family, region. Like, there's a point in promoting a fight where like it could definitely go too far as crossing certain boundaries, especially when maybe like it's not clear to both parties that it's
the language barrier definitely doesn't help. Even with the cheating, I feel like a lot of that had to do with the language barrier. Like Herb Dean probably would have favored McGregor more. I mean, just because like it's just the way it is. Like champions and high level fighters, like they get more chances to recover. Yeah. I mean, like for Christ's sakes, he had his fucking feet in the fucking cage for fucking a minute and a half.
I agree. They definitely should have called that out, and the glove holding and the illegal knee.
But if he spoke English, I mean, at least a little bit better. I mean, I feel like he could just look at Herb. Hey, Herb, he's holding the fucking gloves. Do something. I am pissed. Instead of just trying to babble and point kind of at his gloves and have no one really know what's going on and have that ambiguity there.
Yeah,
definitely doesn't help.
And then I mean as well, Conor definitely has to face some degree of punishment for his actions as well. I don't think that those should be as as heavy-handed as the ones that should probably be put on Khabib, just because his actions were a little bit more egregious as far as jumping out of the cage and proactively attacking somebody in that manner. But obviously Conor did get into a little bit of a scuffle, which some of that was in reaction to being attacked from behind, but it was instigated by him with that.
Yeah. Now, I do have to say also that the Nevada State Athletic Commission originally gave Conor McGregor his full purse. So the pay-per-views aren't in yet. So all of that money, like the real big money, isn't going to come for a while. But Conor's given a few million by the UFC just straight up for pay. Khabib is also given some straight up pay. Khabib was given about $2 million. I'm not sure what McGregor's number was, but Conor was originally paid in full, and now they want to go after some of his money, which I think they should. You know, they like maybe a $250,000 fine for both of them, maybe more. You know, maybe like a 10%, whatever they're gonna do. Yeah. I don't think they could take any more.
There definitely needs to be some signal from the UFC, like that. Hey, this cannot happen again, and if this does happen again, it's gonna be met with like swift, heavy punishment.
Now, obviously, from a disciplinary standpoint, failing a drug test would probably be worse. But do you think this should be worse than a failed drug test for either of them? Like, if either of them failed for, like, say, clomiphene, do you think that they should sit out longer for doing something like this? Either one of them.
Yeah, that's a difficult question because, on one hand, like, yeah, I can definitely appreciate. Yeah, I mean, like, as far as like testing positive for like something as like an illegal substance or whatever, I can see how like that automatically triggers certain levels of time for suspensions and whatnot, and why that's a good thing to try to help clean up the sport. But with something like this, where like you literally have like violence and like not just like outside of mixed martial arts, just like legally, like obviously no charges. Against Khabib.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say go back to the Make-A-Wish thing. The 4 Make-A-Wish kids in the audience. A lot of those kids are sick. What if one of them gets trampled and dies or something? And like not even intentionally, just the consequence of this shit going on. Like what the fuck?
It's a total liability for them. I mean, that's why I think it was smart for Dana probably to not have put the belt on Khabib and have the place erupt and have more stuff occur. But I mean, I honestly think that you'd think that this would be more significant than testing.
Well, they should probably be given a year plus or 2 years plus or whatever just for this. But
because it's more egregious.
But for business reasons, probably not. I mean,
exactly, because that's what really governs the reality behind all that.
And if Conor Conor originally vowed to never fight again, and I believe was it Nevada when they tried to fine him for the Diaz thing, and then they like heavily reduced his fine and only slapped him on the wrist, and it really just kind of shows like Nevada would rather have Conor McGregor fight 10 more times there in his career and pocket that money than they would have him sit.
Make an example.
Even to an extent, Herb Dean, like maybe Herb Dean wasn't doing that because he didn't want it. Well, one, he didn't want the public backlash from fucking Conor McGregor out of a chance to win or in any way.
But doesn't want to miss a chance to be the one to do that sort of thing again. In the event that there's another big one. Yeah,
it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, at what point does Conor's fame end? Does it? I mean, at this point, probably not, right? He's too rich. I mean, unless he has like a very public downfall, he won't be touched. He won't be touched by like the law for even the Dolly thing. Like he didn't get anything for that. You think he gives a fuck?
Yeah, he's too rich, and I mean he can talk really well.
And yes, Dana White. Do you know how many millions of dollars that cost him? Yeah, a few $1 million, maybe what $10-20 million. But do you know how much money that also gained him? How many pay-per-views did that sell this fight? How many pay-per-views is it going to sell now as a fucking result of that? So what? He paid $50 million, but he got $250 million as a result. You know what I mean? Like, what's the? Yeah. Who gives a shit at that point?
Exactly.
But yeah. So moving on again. Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz was scheduled for the UFC 230 card that's going down in November. But now Poirier Diaz is off the card. Poirier has pulled out with an undisclosed injury, and it was rumored, not really rumored like by anybody really, but just like talks on the internet, that Conor Diaz 3 was being looked at, but Conor's team just denied those rumors, so that fight's not happening. But I mean, right after fucking Black Beast versus Daniel Cormier was announced, this fight gets pulled off. Like that's pretty crazy. I mean, that fight is stacked on its own. I have it right here. I mean, we have Daniel Cormier, Derek Lewis for the heavyweight title, assuming Lewis stays healthy and stays in the fight. If not, Stipe could probably step in. Mm-hmm. Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman. That's a hell of a fight. That's a rematch from their middleweight title fight a couple years ago, in which Weidman he threw that spinning shit and got taken down and finished.
Yeah, I look forward to that one for sure.
We have Ronaldo Jacare Souza versus David Branch. That's a crazy fight. Derek Brunson, Israel Adesanya. That's a crazy fight. And then, I mean, got a couple other names on there. We got Shane Burgos on the undercard, Jack Marshman, Lando Venata. We got Jason Knight. We got some names on there. It's going to be, not too bad of a card, but, to lose Poirier Diaz, like, that's a really big fight.
Yeah, I definitely. That's going to suffer a lot because of the lack of that fight.
And I also have to wonder, not saying this happened, but USADA announced that they're not going to. So, like, if somebody fails a drug test, before what would happen was they would announce that a fighter failed, but what would happen as a result of that is, like, Twitter would blow up or Instagram would blow up, and everyone would think this person failed the drug test and they're guilty and they cheated. But a lot of times they test their B sample and it would come back clean. So then USADA would have to, like, essentially, like, retract everything they said before and say, like, no, this fight is clean, but the damage is already done on that fighter's public image. So I have to wonder now, are some of these fighters getting pulled out of these fights and saying an undisclosed injury, or just like Sean O'Malley, for example. Nobody knew that his fight got pulled from UFC 229. He revealed it himself on like Instagram or Twitter, right? So if he didn't reveal that, like, if he just gets yanked from the card and he's not injured, what are people supposed to think? Isn't that almost more confusing? Like, if fighters just start getting yanked from these high profile fights and they have no injuries and, like, they're fine, people are going to know that they're, they failed the drug test. And I guess it's correct of USADA to not out these people that may have or may not have cheated before they know, like, definitively. But at the same, like, I think Sean O'Malley did it right. Like, he revealed, like, that he failed for a substance and, like, he wasn't too sure what was going on, and, like, he kind of outed himself. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like,
definitely interesting as far as handling it that way. I don't think that's the best way to handle it if that's what's going on. I mean, it definitely is nice. I mean, to do that to the fighter, like, for the fighter's perspective, because, of course, in the event that you do have your A sample come away positive and you really didn't do anything wrong and you get cleared up by the B1, then of course that shouldn't be reported and have your character defamed.
Should you be allowed to fight while they're testing your B sample still? Like, I don't know. I really don't know, because
probably not.
Probably not. But you technically haven't done anything wrong yet. You're just waiting for your due process.
That's true. That's definitely true. But yeah, I mean, I could understand that.
And
I guess.
And obviously, we know that a lot of these fighters have day jobs, but in theory, these are professional fighters at the highest level, so they shouldn't have day jobs, right? Like, their fighting should be their day job.
Yeah.
You're taking away their ability to earn money while they're doing that.
Based off of an uncertainty.
Yeah, and in some cases, these tests don't come back. I mean, nowadays it's pretty much within 2-3 weeks they know, but sometimes they don't come back for months at a time, and then it goes to, like, arbitration, and the fighter doesn't agree with what punishment they want to give them. And then sometimes, actually, what happens, like, not sometimes, most of the time now, the only time I can think where this didn't happen was Josh Barnett. A fighter will fail a drug test, B sample comes back clean, they're acquitted of all wrongdoing. USADA wants to suspend them 6 months anyway. Just like, oh yeah, you failed, so we're going to give you a slap on the wrist, we're going to give you a 6-month suspension to be back in there in no time, bud. Okay, but you just fucking suspended me 6 months, and I couldn't make money all that time. Like, what the fuck? Like, so you're still punishing me, and is that my first offense or second offense? Because you just fucking sanctioned me. So if I actually do fail a drug test now, I've already been punished by you one time.
Right.
And under your own rules, if you've already been punished under our system, now you're fucked. You're going to get a double suspension or triple suspension if your name's not John Jones. So,
right.
What the fuck?
I can definitely understand that too.
I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the best solution to the whole problem is. But there's definitely gaping holes in terms of the process at the moment.
So, Yeah, I mean, I think one of the last things here is Valentina Shevchenko and Ioana Jędrzejczyk is back on for the women's flyweight title. It's going to be at UFC 231 now on December 8th. Um, yeah, I mean, that fight's back on. It was originally pulled, and they were going to have Valentina fight. Honestly, I can't think of her name right now. And that's no disrespect to her. I can't think of it. Sierra Eubanks, that's who it was. Sorry about that. I couldn't think of that. But yeah, that was looked at as a UFC 230 headliner, and they decided after the social media backlash, like it just wasn't worth it. Like people weren't interested in that fight at all. And I mean, if people aren't interested in a headlining fight, that was going to be in Madison Square Garden. You can't headline Madison Square Garden with Valentina Shevchenko and fucking Sierra Eubanks. I'm sorry, you can't.
Yeah, that's definitely not a good choice for like a main event.
Yeah, I mean
MSG in particular.
And now the Ioana fight is scheduled for Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I mean, like it's a pretty big MMA town, but like they usually put the smaller events there because they're not going to do that well. Max Holloway and Ortega is expected to headline that card, but yeah, like Eubanks, Valentina Shevchenko would have done like record low numbers at MSG, and like we've grown accustomed to MSG having like some of the biggest cards of the year, and that's really where it should be.
I agree. It should definitely be reserved for like only the biggest events.
And I'm not saying Derek Lewis versus Cormier is that fight that we need, but that paired with the Diaz Poirier would have been great. I mean that the card stacked enough to to sell pay-per-views, I think. But now without the Diaz Poirier fight, like that card's in a rough spot. But that's all we have today. Send your mailbag questions if you have any to outofendicott@gmail.com. We'll answer like, I don't know, anything you want to know, questions about fights. We don't only do MMA episodes. This just happened to be an MMA themed episode. But
See you next time.